Keep the change, sweetheart, we're not a soup kitchen. The words dropped like ice cubes into the quiet hum of the restaurant. A handful of coins and wrinkled dollar bills followed, sailing through the air and clattering against the metal rim of a trash can beside the counter. Every sound in the room paused: the shuffle of plates, the whisper of jazz from the ceiling speakers. Even the faint whir of the espresso machine seemed to hold its breath. Naomi Harris stood still, her right hand resting on the thin slip of a receipt, her left gripping the strap of her worn leather bag. The bills she'd handed over moments earlier lay in the trash, half buried beneath paper napkins and lemon wedges. Rachel Morrison, the general manager of Pinnacle Bistro, wiped the counter with a white towel as though she were erasing Naomi's existence. She didn't look up when she spoke again. "We have standards here," she said, spraying disinfectant over the spot where the money had been. "Maybe McDonald's down the street would be more your style." Naomi blinked once, slowly. The air smelled of bleach and grilled salmon. The murmur of diners started again, nervous, pretending to be occupied with their meals. In a corner booth, an older couple whispered to each other. A young man in a tie coughed and lowered his eyes. Naomi's voice, when it came, was calm, steady, and impossibly polite. "I paid in full," she said. "All I wanted was my receipt and a little respect." Rachel laughed under her breath. "You people always want something extra." She flicked the towel into the sink, grabbed a bottle of sanitizer, and began spraying again. "You should be grateful I let you sit down at all." Naomi's throat tightened, but her expression didn't change. Inside, a quiet thought passed through her mind like an old echo. Same tone, same stare. Different decade. The first time she'd heard that tone she'd been 12 years old, sitting in her mother's car outside a diner in Birmingham. Snow on the windshield, a closed sign on the door that had still opened for everyone else. She'd promised herself, then, that she would never flinch again. At the back of the restaurant, Zoe Whitman, a college student with blonde curls and a cracked iPhone, lifted her phone discreetly. The red light blinked. Her whisper was barely audible. "This is Georgetown, D.C., 2025. Same old story." The screen filled with comments before she even said another word. "Unreal. Name the restaurant. This can't be happening now." At the counter, Naomi extended her hand. "May I speak with your manager?" Rachel turned, arms crossed. "You're looking at her. And I'm telling you, this place isn't for everybody." The way she said everybody landed with a weight everyone in the room understood but nobody dared to acknowledge. A fork slipped from someone's hand. It sounded louder than it should have. Naomi's eyes moved from Rachel's face to the trash can, then back again. "Then perhaps you could give me the number for your corporate office," she said. "I'd like to file a formal complaint." Rachel's smile was sharp, thin. "Our system's down. No access today." Her voice lowered. "You should really go before I have to ask security to escort you." She signaled toward the doorway where a tall security guard was already watching, his expression uneasy. Naomi didn't move. She felt her pulse in her fingertips but kept her shoulders still. "I'll wait," she said. Rachel stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. "People like you always make a scene. Then you cry about being victims. I've seen it 1,000 times." The words were meant to sting, but Naomi had long since learned the difference between anger and control. She turned slightly, her eyes sweeping the room, the framed black and white photos of Georgetown's skyline, the flicker of candlelight on tables, the faces watching her and then quickly looking away. "All I did," she said quietly, "was pay for my lunch." A man in his late 50s, silver hair, blue tie, shifted in his seat. He'd been served by Rachel earlier. She'd called him sir. Smiled. Poured his wine with both hands. Now he couldn't meet Naomi's eyes. Zoe's phone caught everything: the trembling camera, the nervous glances, the bright metal of the trash can glinting like an accusation. Rachel turned toward the security guard. "Joe, please escort this lady out before she upsets our regulars." Joe hesitated. "Ma'am," he began, but Rachel cut him off. "Now." Naomi reached into her bag slowly. For a moment, everyone tensed, expecting confrontation. Instead, she pulled out a small wallet, flipped it open, and placed her driver's license on the counter beside the trash can. I'm not leaving, she said softly. I paid. And I have every right to finish my meal. Her calm unsettled Rachel more than shouting ever could. Rachel's cheeks flushed red. If you don't go, I'll call the police. Naomi folded her receipt, placed it into her bag, and looked at the woman for a long, quiet moment. Do what you think is right. Her voice was low, even. Just make sure you can live with it afterward. For a heartbeat. Neither woman moved. Then the front door opened, letting in a draft of summer air, and the faint sound of city traffic. The smell of rain mixed with roasted garlic. A siren wailed somewhere far away. Naomi turned slightly toward the window, her reflection overlapping with the neon sign outside that read fine dining. Exceptional service. Her reflection smiled without humor. Around her, the world resumed. Dishes clinked, a jazz trumpet wailed softly from the speakers, and Rachel reached for the phone. In the corner, Zoe whispered into her microphone. This is the moment she calls the cops on a paying customer. Her comment section exploded. Naomi didn't look at her. She looked at the clock on the wall. 12:53. She knew what time it was, though Rachel did not. 7 minutes until the city health inspector arrived for his scheduled review. The thought almost made her smile. She took a step back from the counter, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, and folded her hands in front of her like someone preparing for church. Rachel slammed the receiver down after calling. You can wait outside, she said. Naomi shook her head. I'll wait right here. The silence that followed was heavier than anger. It was the kind of silence that makes witnesses question their own decency. At a nearby table, Maria, a waitress in her 50s, looked up from where she was refilling water glasses. Her eyes met Naomi's for an instant, an apology lived there, small but sincere. Naomi gave her a faint nod, as if to say, it's all right, I understand. The minutes stretched thin. Outside, a patrol car rolled past but didn't stop. Inside, Zoe's phone kept streaming. The restaurant's manager stood rigid behind the counter, arms folded, lips pressed into a line. The woman she had tried to humiliate stood silent, unbent, as though rooted to the marble floor. Finally, Naomi broke the quiet with a voice that carried farther than volume could measure. All I asked for, she said, was to be treated like any other paying customer. The words floated through the restaurant, steady and deliberate. In that stillness, even Rachel blinked. Somewhere deep inside the building, a timer chimed. An oven finished its cycle, a bell of ordinary life ringing through extraordinary tension. No one yet knew that before the next bell, before the hour turned, everything in this restaurant would change. But in that moment, coins in a trash can, pride intact, and a dozen strangers watching the story had already begun. That morning had begun with the click of a pen and the faint smell of polished wood. The law office on M Street was quiet except for the rhythmic hum of an old ceiling fan. Sunlight poured through tall windows, glinting off framed certificates and the silver clasp of a leather briefcase resting on the desk. Naomi Harris sat across from attorney Michael Cole, her posture straight, her hands folded neatly over the stack of papers in front of her. She had dressed simply: cream blouse, gray slacks, no jewelry but a small gold band on her right hand. The pen she held was old, black lacquer, with a thin scratch down one side. Her mother's pen. It had signed paychecks, permission slips, and eventually hospital forms. Today, it would sign something different. Congratulations, Miss Harris, Cole said, offering a restrained smile. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Harris Hospitality Group officially owns every Pinnacle Bistro in the district and Virginia markets. You're now the sole shareholder. Naomi looked at the signature line, then at the reflection of the sunlight in the window. A pigeon perched on the sill, cocking its head, as if waiting for her to decide. It's not about ownership, she said quietly. It's about repair. She signed her name with a slow, deliberate stroke. The pen glided smoothly, as though it remembered how much her mother had loved handwriting: elegant, patient, steady. When the last curve of the S dried, she set the pen down and exhaled. Cole tapped the folder shut. There's something poetic about this, isn't there? He said. A black-owned group taking over a chain that once refused to hire anyone above the dishroom. Your mother would be proud. Naomi smiled faintly. She would also tell me not to make promises I can't keep. She gathered the documents into her bag and stood. On the credenza behind Cole's desk sat a photograph of his grandchildren, 3 boys in baseball uniforms, their gloves held high. Naomi's eyes lingered there for a moment. "You have grandsons," she said. "I do." "Why?" "Because I hope," she murmured. "When they're grown, they won't need a headline to remind them to act like decent men." Cole nodded, thoughtful. He didn't speak as she left. Outside, Washington was waking. Delivery trucks honked, a street vendor poured coffee into paper cups, and a bus engine rumbled at the corner. Naomi walked south toward her car, her heels clicking in steady rhythm against the wet sidewalk. The sky hung low with early summer haze. Every breath tasted faintly of humidity and possibility. She unlocked the silver sedan she had driven for almost 10 years, not the kind of car that drew attention, which suited her fine. On the passenger seat waited a slim folder labeled, "Site Visits." She had spent weeks reviewing complaints about inconsistent service, rude staff, and subtle bias at several bistro locations. Each letter had felt like an echo of her own childhood. She reached into her purse and touched the pen again. The metal was warm, almost alive. Memory slipped through her like a film reel. Alabama. Winter of '89. Her mother's hand gripping the steering wheel so tightly the knuckles had turned white. A diner with a neon sign that flickered open 24 hours. But when they'd walked in, the waitress had said the grill was closed. Minutes later, a white family came in and ordered pancakes. Naomi remembered the way her mother's jaw clenched, the tremor in her voice when she whispered, "Come on, baby, let's go." They had eaten cold sandwiches in the car, watching other people laugh inside. The smell of bacon had lingered in the air like a taunt. That night, Naomi's mother had said, "One day, baby, you'll walk into any place you want, and they'll have to see you." She had meant it as hope. Naomi had carried it as a challenge. Back in the present, Naomi started the car and merged into traffic. The radio played softly a Motown classic her mother used to hum while cooking. The singer's voice was rough around the edges, honest. "Ain't no mountain high enough." Naomi smiled despite herself. Her first stop that morning had been unannounced at a bistro location near Arlington. The manager there, a young Latina woman named Carla, had greeted her warmly without recognizing her as the new owner. Service had been impeccable. The second visit, however, in Georgetown, was scheduled for next week. Or at least, that had been the plan. But the more Naomi read the online reviews, customers describing dismissive service, condescending comments, subtle insults, the more she felt an itch beneath her ribs. She wanted to see it for herself, not through reports or recordings. Incognito. The car's turn signal clicked as she merged off the highway. She reached for her phone, opened a voice memo, and spoke softly. "Note for audit: Georgetown location to be observed unscheduled. Focus on staff behavior toward walk-ins, unreserved guests, and racial bias indicators." She paused, then added, "And maybe order the grilled salmon." By the time she parked near Wisconsin Avenue, it was nearly noon. The street shimmered with heat, the sidewalks busy with lunch crowds and tourists. Naomi adjusted her blouse, slipped her phone into her bag, and took one last look at her reflection in the side mirror. No one would guess she was a multimillionaire, or that her name would appear on every corporate lease by sundown. That anonymity felt powerful. She entered Pinnacle Bistro quietly, greeted by the scent of roasted coffee and lemon butter. The hostess, a young woman with a nervous smile, handed her a menu without making eye contact. Naomi took a seat near the window. For a while, things seemed ordinary. The waiter brought water, the jazz played, and sunlight glowed through the glass. Then Rachel Morrison appeared from the kitchen, crisp white blouse, a name tag glinting under the lights. She had the confident stride of someone used to being obeyed. Naomi recognized the type immediately. She had met hundreds in boardrooms, the gatekeepers of comfort, the self-appointed judges of who belonged. Rachel didn't glance at Naomi at first. She focused on a table of businessmen, laughing too loudly over bourbon. But when Naomi stood to pay her bill, Rachel intercepted her at the counter. That was when the words came. "Keep the change, sweetheart. We're not a soup kitchen." Naomi replayed that line now as she sat behind the wheel again, hours later, parked outside the same restaurant. The patrol car was gone. The crowd had dispersed. Through the tinted glass, she could see Rachel pacing behind the counter, still unaware of who she had spoken to. Naomi's lips curved into a small, private smile, not of triumph, but of certainty. Change was coming, whether Rachel welcomed it or not. Her phone buzzed a message from her assistant, Thomas. Contract finalized. Press release pending. Do you want to go public today or wait? Naomi typed back, wait. Not yet. I want to see what honesty looks like when no one's watching. She placed the phone face down and stared at the building. The letters on the glass door gleamed gold in the afternoon sun. Pinnacle Bistro. Fine dining. Exceptional service. She thought of her mother again, the way she had whispered prayers before every night shift, the smell of starch and soap on her uniform. Dignity wasn't a slogan, it was survival. Naomi started the car, but she didn't drive off. Instead, she rolled down the window, listening to the city, the bus brakes hissing. A saxophone player down the block. The low hum of conversation. Washington carried its own rhythm, part ambition, part exhaustion. Somewhere behind those glass walls, a woman like Rachel believed she held power. But Naomi knew better. True power was silent, patient, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. She looked at the folder on the passenger seat, her mother's pen resting on top. All right, Mama, she whispered. Time to see if they've learned anything. She stepped out of the car, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and walked toward the restaurant doors. Each step was measured, her heartbeat steady, her purpose clear. The hostess looked up, startled to see the same woman return. Naomi smiled pleasantly. The kind of smile that hides the weight of generations behind it. Table for one, she said. The girl nodded, hesitated for a moment, then led her to a booth. Naomi sat down, hands folded, eyes calm. Outside, the sky shifted from pale blue to the dull shimmer of heat. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lemon and arrogance. In 7 minutes, the health inspector would arrive. In 10, the truth would start to unfold. But for now, Naomi simply waited, patient, poised. The picture of composure while the world prepared to meet the woman it thought it could throw away. Naomi sat perfectly still, the hum of the restaurant wrapping around her like a quiet storm waiting to break. The faint hiss of the espresso machine, the clinking of forks, the low jazz spilling from the ceiling speakers, every sound had an edge now. Her eyes followed Rachel Morrison as the woman stalked from the counter to the dining room, her heels clicking against the tile in short, sharp beats. Rachel barked an order to a waiter about table settings, then glanced toward Naomi as if she were an uninvited guest who had overstayed her welcome. Naomi's face gave nothing away. She had learned long ago that silence could be sharper than any accusation. From her seat by the window she could see the reflection of the street outside, cars gliding past. The glow of shopfronts. The shadow of a street musician playing saxophone on the corner. Inside, time moved differently. She lifted her glass of water, took a slow sip, and watched Rachel approach another table, where 2 white men in suits were waiting for their check. "Gentlemen, I hope everything was perfect," Rachel said, her tone honeyed, professional. One of the men chuckled, slipping her a tip folded twice. Rachel's smile was bright and practiced. "We'll see you next week," she added before gliding back to the counter. Then her eyes landed on Naomi again, and the smile faded. Across the room, Maria, the older waitress with kind eyes, pretended to wipe down a table. Her movements were deliberate, almost protective. Naomi caught her gaze for an instant and gave the smallest nod, a signal that said, "I'm fine." Zoe, the college student, was still there, pretending to scroll through her phone. But her camera was pointed at the counter. The live stream chat kept flashing across her screen. "This is insane. Don't stop filming. Who is that lady?" The number of viewers had already crossed 10,000. "Miss, are you sure you want to stay?" Maria asked softly when she passed Naomi's booth, setting down a napkin. "She's already called security." Naomi looked up at her and smiled. "Yes, I'm sure. I'm just waiting for something." Maria hesitated, then whispered, "You're brave." Naomi shook her head. "No. Just tired." Rachel's voice cut through the murmur like glass breaking. "Joe," she shouted toward the front. The security guard, a tall black man with worry creasing his forehead, walked over. Ma'am? Escort this woman out, Rachel said, pointing at Naomi without looking directly at her. She's disturbing the guests. Joe looked from Rachel to Naomi and back. Disturbing how? She's making my customers uncomfortable. Rachel's tone was brisk, irritated. Joe scratched his head. She's just sitting there. Are you arguing with me now? Rachel snapped. Joe sighed, the kind of sigh that came from too many long shifts and too few choices. All right, ma'am, he said to Naomi. I'm gonna have to ask you to step outside. Naomi met his eyes. There was no anger, only weariness. I understand you're just doing your job, she said. But I'll wait right here. I haven't done anything wrong. Joe hesitated, uncertain. Rachel rolled her eyes. God. This is ridiculous. Why do I have to handle everything myself? She picked up the phone and dialed, her nails tapping the counter in quick, angry rhythm. Yes, I need an officer at Pinnacle Bistro on Wisconsin Avenue, she said. We have a disturbance. Her voice dropped, laced with contempt. African-American female, mid-40s, refusing to leave. Naomi felt the words land like pebbles thrown against her chest. She'd heard that description her whole life, cold, coded, efficient. But instead of reacting, she glanced at the digital clock on the wall. 12:57. 3 minutes before the inspector arrived. Timing, her mother had always said, was the difference between patience and fate. Zoe's camera captured Rachel hanging up the phone. Cops are coming, she whispered into her mic. And she's just sitting there like a queen. The livestream chat exploded again. Stay live. Don't cut it. She looks so calm. The door opened and a gust of hot air swept in. Naomi didn't turn around. The city health inspector, a stout man with thinning hair and a clipboard, stepped inside. Afternoon, he announced. Inspection day. Rachel froze, mid-step. Her face rearranged itself instantly into a smile. Of course. We've been expecting you, she said, voice sugary now. Just finishing up a small issue. Small issue? The inspector repeated, his tone neutral but curious. His eyes followed hers to Naomi, then to the security guard standing awkwardly by the counter. Everything okay here? Perfectly fine, Rachel said too quickly. Just a misunderstanding. Naomi turned her head slightly toward the inspector. Good afternoon, she said politely. I'm just waiting for my receipt. Something in her voice calm, unshaken made the man nod as if to an equal. He walked toward the kitchen. I'll start in the back, he said. See if the reports match the records. Naomi noticed the way Rachel's shoulders stiffened at the word reports. She looked ready to chase after him but couldn't leave the counter while Naomi was still there. At that same moment, the front door swung open again. A man in his 60s entered wearing a navy suit and a lapel pin shaped like a fork. He carried the air of quiet authority that only came from decades in the industry. Robert Carter, Restaurant Association, he said to Rachel. We had a 1 o'clock meeting to discuss partnership standards. Rachel blinked, clearly unprepared. Oh, Mr. Carter. Yes, of course. Just a moment. Her voice trembled. Carter's gaze swept across the room. Everything all right here? He asked. Zoe's phone tilted slightly, capturing his face. Naomi almost smiled. The stage was set. Joe shifted uncomfortably. I think maybe we should just wait for the police, he murmured. Rachel snapped. No one asked you. The tension was thick enough to taste. Naomi exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Inside her bag, the folder containing the signed purchase contracts seemed to hum with weight. Not yet, she told herself. Let them finish writing their own story before I turn the page. Rachel fussed with the register, pretending to check receipts. Some people think they can walk in here and demand anything, she muttered loudly. I've run this place for years, and I know what kind of customers fit our image. Maria flinched. Carter's eyebrows lifted slightly but he said nothing yet. Naomi's mind drifted briefly to her mother's voice. Dignity isn't silence, baby. It's control. She took another sip of water, then folded the napkin on her lap with deliberate grace. Rachel slammed a drawer shut, startling everyone. You know what, she said, glaring at Naomi. You can wait for the police outside, but you're not sitting here making a scene in my restaurant. Naomi's reply was soft but carried through the room. I'm not the one making a scene. A few customers at nearby tables looked up, sensing something bigger than a customer dispute unfolding before them. The inspector returned from the kitchen, frowning. Miss Morrison, you might want to check your cooler temperatures. Several items aren't in compliance. Rachel's mouth fell open. That's impossible, she said. I just checked. Thermometer doesn't lie, the inspector said. We'll be writing this up. Robert Carter adjusted his cufflinks, glancing between the two women. Miss Morrison, perhaps now's not the best time for hostility. We should all focus on professionalism. Rachel flushed. Of course, sir. She stopped when the door opened once more and two uniformed officers entered. The taller one holding a notepad. Ma'am, we received a call, he said. You the manager? Rachel nodded eagerly. Yes, officer. Thank goodness you're here. That woman, she pointed at Naomi, is refusing to leave after causing a disturbance. The officer's gaze followed her finger to Naomi, who remained seated, serene. The older of the two officers, a Latino man named Rodriguez, studied her quietly before asking, Ma'am, may I ask what happened? Naomi looked up at him and smiled faintly. I ordered lunch. I paid for it. And I was told this wasn't a soup kitchen. The younger officer blinked. Rodriguez's expression didn't change. All right, he said slowly. Let's just make sure everyone stays calm. Rachel crossed her arms. She's lying. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. We'll sort it out. He turned slightly toward Naomi. Would you mind telling me your name? Naomi's fingers brushed the edge of her handbag. Not yet, she thought. Let them keep digging. She said, Naomi. Naomi Harris. Rachel huffed. Naomi Harris, she repeated mockingly. Like that means anything. Outside, thunder rolled low across the sky. The inspector looked toward the window, murmured something about timing, and began writing on his clipboard. Inside, the air thickened. Every tick of the clock pushed them closer to 1 o'clock. Naomi straightened in her seat. Officer, she said, her voice calm but edged with purpose. Before we go any further, may I ask that Mr. Carter here stay as witness? Carter nodded. Of course. Rachel frowned, confused by Naomi's composure. The guard Joe rubbed the back of his neck, glancing nervously toward the door. Zoe's live stream counter jumped past 15,000. Naomi placed her hands flat on the table. Steady. Ready. The next few minutes would change everything, not just for her, but for every person watching who had ever been told they didn't belong. The minute hand clicked forward to 1 o'clock. The moment of truth was finally in the room. The clock on the wall struck 1, and the sound cut through the air like a bell at Judgment Day. Every eye in the restaurant seemed to shift toward Naomi, the quiet woman who sat unbothered while authority gathered around her. The two police officers stood near the entrance, their radios crackling softly, one hand resting on a notepad, the other on a belt. The inspector was still scribbling in his clipboard, shaking his head at Rachel's food storage violations. Robert Carter leaned against a chair, arms crossed, watching the scene with a mix of curiosity and disapproval. Rachel's composure began to crack. She could feel the weight of so many eyes, of the camera still streaming, of her own arrogance catching up. Officer, please, she said, forcing a polite smile. This woman is refusing to leave. She's disturbing my staff and my customers. I don't understand why this is taking so long. Rodriguez, the older officer, studied her for a moment before replying evenly. Ma'am, from what I see, she's sitting quietly. Why don't you explain what exactly she did to disturb anyone? Rachel hesitated, then gestured helplessly. She threw a fit when I tried to sanitize the counter. Started making comments about respect, threatening to call corporate. Naomi's eyes didn't waver. I asked for my receipt. You raised your voice, Rachel insisted. You made everyone uncomfortable. Rodriguez's partner shifted, clearly uncomfortable himself. The inspector, perhaps sensing the deeper current, stepped closer. Miss Morrison, this isn't really a police matter. If your employee training needs review, handle that through corporate. I'd suggest you focus on fixing your refrigerator before I cite you. Employee training? Rachel echoed. Sir, I am the manager. Right. the inspector said dryly, jotting another note. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time, the windows trembling with the vibration. The air conditioning hummed, overcompensating for the tension. Zoe's livestream had climbed past 20,000 viewers, her audience firing comments faster than she could read them. "This is wild. Who's the lady in white? She's so calm, it's terrifying." Robert Carter cleared his throat. "Miss Morrison, I think you'd better choose your next words carefully. This looks unpleasant." Rachel turned toward him, defensive. "With all due respect, Mr. Carter. This isn't your business. I'm handling it." "You called the police over a receipt," he replied. "It's everybody's business now." Naomi felt the shift in the room, a small but palpable tilt in energy. The arrogance that had filled the space earlier began to leak out like air from a punctured tire. Rachel's certainty wavered. She tightened her jaw, eyes darting between the officers and the woman she still didn't recognize as her employer. "This is absurd," she muttered. "I'm trying to run a respectable establishment." Naomi finally stood. The motion was calm, deliberate, like someone preparing to speak in court. Her voice was steady, rich, but quiet enough to make others lean in. "Officer Rodriguez, may I ask one thing before we go any further?" He nodded. "Of course, ma'am. Would you like to know who I am?" The question hung in the air, strange and disarming. Rodriguez blinked. "Ma'am?" "I said," she repeated, eyes on Rachel. "Would you like to know who I am?" Rachel scoffed. "We all know who you are, a customer who doesn't know how to behave." "No," Naomi said, her tone soft but unyielding. "You don't know anything about me." She reached into her bag, and again, the room held its breath. But instead of anger or resistance, she pulled out a small black wallet and placed it gently on the counter. Then she withdrew a white card embossed with gold letters and slid it toward Rachel. "Maybe this will help." Rachel frowned, squinting at the card. Then her expression shifted from irritation to disbelief. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "Naomi Harris." She read aloud, almost whispering. "Owner and CEO, Harris Hospitality Group." Robert Carter straightened immediately. The inspector froze, pen still hovering midair. Rodriguez's eyebrows lifted. Rachel's hand trembled. What is this supposed to mean?" Naomi met her gaze. "It means you just threw away your boss's change." A beat of silence. Then, another. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to fade. The entire restaurant was still. Rachel's mouth opened and closed, as if searching for a word that would undo the last minute of her life. "That can't be true," she managed to stammer. "Corporate would have told us." "Corporate doesn't owe you a warning," Naomi interrupted gently. "You've had plenty." She opened the folder in her bag, pulling out the signed contract, stamped with the date and time. "This morning, 9 o'clock sharp, I became the sole owner of every Pinnacle Bistro in this city. Including this one." Rodriguez leaned closer, studying the papers. Carter gave a low whistle. "Well," he said, "that explains a few things." Zoe's livestream chat exploded with emojis and disbelief. "What? The owner? Plot twist of the year." Rachel stepped back, pale. I didn't know," she stuttered. "You can't hold this against me." "I didn't mean." "You didn't mean to what?" Naomi asked quietly. "To insult me? To throw away money because you decided I didn't belong here?" "It was just a misunderstanding. 12 complaints say otherwise," Naomi said, sliding another document from the folder. An internal audit of customer feedback, highlighting instances of racial discrimination and misconduct under Rachel's management. "I didn't come here to trap you, Miss Morrison. I came here to see if those complaints were exaggerated. Unfortunately, they weren't." Rachel's eyes darted to the officers, searching for help, but they stood silent. Rodriguez finally said, "Ma'am, sounds like this is a business matter, not a criminal one." Naomi nodded. "You're right, officer. But justice isn't limited to courts." She turned to Rachel again. "I came here hoping to find fairness. Instead, I found proof that arrogance can't hide behind uniforms or titles." Maria, who had been frozen near the wall, let out a small gasp, then quickly covered her mouth. Zoe's camera zoomed closer, capturing the moment Rachel's pride collapsed. "Please. Rachel said, her voice cracking. Don't do this. I've worked here for years. I was just having a bad day. Naomi's expression softened, but only slightly. We all have bad days, she said. But bad days don't turn good people cruel. She picked up the crumpled receipt from her table, smoothed it out, and placed it on the counter beside the trash can where her change still lay buried. I'll make this official, she said, her tone calm. Rachel Morrison, your employment with this company ends today. Effective immediately. Rachel stared at her, eyes wet, speechless. The inspector cleared his throat. I'll, note that management is changing hands, he said, backing toward the door. Carter approached Naomi, nodding respectfully. Miss Harris, he said, if you ever need assistance with rebranding or public relations, the association would be honored to help. Thank you, Mr. Carter, Naomi replied. But I think the truth will handle publicity just fine. Rodriguez tipped his cap slightly. Ma'am, looks like you've got this handled. We'll clear out. Thank you, officer, Naomi said. And they exited quietly, leaving the weight of the moment to settle like dust. Rachel began to sob, the sound small and raw. You can't destroy my whole life over one mistake, she whispered. Naomi regarded her with an expression that held both pity and steel. This isn't one mistake, she said. It's a pattern, and today, it stops. The rain began outside, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the glass. Naomi turned toward Maria. Would you please retrieve my change from the trash? She asked gently. Maria hesitated, then nodded. She reached into the bin with a napkin and carefully pulled out the coins and crumpled bills, placing them on the counter. Naomi looked at them, then at Rachel. Dignity isn't something you can throw away and pick back up when it's convenient, she said quietly. But you can start by trying. Rachel stared at the trash can, then slowly bent down. Her shoulders shook as she reached inside, hands trembling. The sight drew a collective breath from the diners. Naomi turned away. Maria, she said softly. Once she's done, please escort her out. Maria nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Naomi walked toward the door, pausing under the framed sign that read Fine Dining. Exceptional service. She touched the edge of it gently, almost like a benediction. Maybe now, she murmured, those words will mean something. The door opened with a soft chime, and Naomi stepped out into the rain, the city lights reflecting in puddles at her feet. Behind her, the restaurant was silent, the kind of silence that follows revelation. And for the first time in years, Naomi felt the storm ease inside her. Justice had spoken not with fury, but with grace. The rain outside came down steady and clean, washing the city in silver light. Naomi stood beneath the awning for a moment, watching cars crawl along the slick street, their headlights stretching across the puddles like ribbons. Behind her, through the glass of Pinnacle Bistro, she could still see Rachel bent over the trash can, retrieving the crumpled money one piece at a time. The sight might have satisfied another person, someone seeking revenge, but for Naomi it stirred something heavier, quieter. Justice wasn't supposed to taste like bitterness. She turned the collar of her coat up and started walking toward her car, each step echoing softly on the wet pavement. The officers had already left, and so had most of the patrons. Only Zoe remained by the window, phone in hand, the red light still glowing. Naomi caught her gaze through the glass. The young woman's expression was half awe, half wonder. Naomi nodded once, a silent acknowledgement between strangers. She opened her car door but didn't start the engine. Instead, she sat there, listening to the rain pattering against the roof, replaying the events in her mind, the words, the silence, the moment of revelation when Rachel realized who she was. It could have ended there, quietly, but Naomi knew better. A public humiliation would go viral for a week and then vanish. Change needed roots deeper than outrage. Her phone vibrated in the passenger seat. A message from her assistant, Thomas. Social media is exploding. We should release a statement before rumors twist the story. Naomi typed back slowly. No statement. Not yet. Let the truth breathe. She placed the phone face down and stared at the dashboard clock. 1:30 p.m. The storm wasn't over, only redirected. She took a deep breath, started the car, and drove back to her office. The city blurred by in streaks of rain and neon. Her reflection in the side window looked older than she remembered, but steadier too. When she reached the parking garage, she sat still for another minute, letting the hum of the engine fade before stepping out. Inside the office, Thomas stood waiting with a tablet in his hands. His tie was crooked, his eyes wide with the kind of excitement that only comes when something monumental is happening. "Miss Harris," he said breathlessly, "the video's everywhere. 70,000 views in an hour. People are calling you the quiet storm." Naomi smiled faintly. "That's a new one. News stations are asking for interviews. Hashtags number Naomi Harris, number dignity in the trash. It's huge." "That's not the point, Thomas." "No ma'am, but it's attention." "Attention fades," she said softly. "Change doesn't, if we do it right." She walked past him into her office. The window behind her desk looked out over the river, gray and swollen with rain. The pen she had used that morning sat beside the stack of legal folders. She picked it up, feeling the familiar weight. "Have you reviewed the internal reports?" she asked without looking up. "Yes," Thomas said. 12 confirmed discrimination complaints under Rachel Morrison's management. 4 unresolved. 2 employees left because of it. Naomi nodded. "And the other managers?" "Most have clean records. But 2 more locations have questionable reviews." "Then that's where we start," she said. "Schedule anonymous visits. No press, no fanfare. Just observation." Thomas hesitated. "What about Rachel?" Naomi turned the pen slowly in her fingers. "She'll get her severance. But she won't get to pretend nothing happened. Draft a letter of termination citing misconduct and violation of company ethics. Send it to HR tonight." Thomas nodded, already typing. "And Miss Harris, what about the young woman with the phone? Zoe something?" Naomi looked thoughtful. "Find her. Invite her to lunch. I'd like to thank her in person." "For filming?" "For seeing." The next day dawned brighter, the storm gone, the air rinsed clean. Naomi arrived at her office early, dressed in a navy suit and low heels, her hair tied back. A vase of lilies sat on her desk, sent anonymously though she suspected it was from Maria, the waitress who had apologized with her eyes. She smiled at the thought. At 10 sharp, the receptionist buzzed. "Miss Harris, there's a Zoe Whitman here to see you. Send her in." Zoe stepped into the room hesitantly, clutching her phone as though it were a shield. She was younger than Naomi had expected, with nervous energy that made her words tumble out fast. "Miss Harris. I hope I'm not in trouble. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. You saw something wrong and you didn't look away," Naomi said. "That takes courage." Zoe flushed. "I didn't know you owned the place. I thought you were just a customer?" Naomi smiled. "That's all I wanted to be that day." She gestured for Zoe to sit. "You did more than record a video. You reminded people that decency still has witnesses. I want to offer you something." Zoe blinked. "A job?" "An opportunity," Naomi corrected. "I'm launching a community program training restaurant staff in cultural sensitivity, fair service, and workplace ethics. We'll need someone young who understands social media, who can tell these stories the right way." Zoe's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Completely. You start Monday." Zoe covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Thank you, I thank you." Naomi nodded. "Just promise me something, keep your lens honest. Show the good as well as the ugly." "I will," Zoe said fiercely. "You have my word." After Zoe left, Naomi sat back, letting the quiet settle around her. The city outside buzzed with life, but in her office there was stillness, a kind of peace. She opened the top drawer of her desk and took out a small framed photo of her mother smiling, holding a tray of coffee mugs in the diner where she'd once worked. "We did it, Mama," she whispered. "Maybe not the way you imagined, but we did." Later that afternoon, she returned to the Georgetown restaurant not as a customer this time, but as its rightful owner. The staff looked nervous as she entered, Maria at the front clutching her apron. Naomi smiled. "Relax. I'm not here to scold anyone." She walked the floor, studying the space. The same sign hung over the counter. Fine dining. Exceptional service. The irony no longer stung. "Starting next week," she said to the assembled staff, We're reopening under new policies. Equal treatment for every guest. Respect isn't optional, it's our menu item number 1. There was a murmur of agreement, tentative but hopeful. Naomi continued. If any of you stayed silent before because you were afraid, I understand. But silence is no longer part of this job description. Maria's eyes glistened. We'll do better, she said softly. I know you will. Naomi left the restaurant with the faint sound of applause behind her. That evening, she sat by her window at home, a mug of tea warming her hands. On the coffee table lay the folded receipt from that fateful day. She hadn't thrown it away. It was wrinkled, stained from the rain, but she couldn't bring herself to discard it. It wasn't just paper. It was proof of endurance, of transformation. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Thomas. The video hit 1 million views. People are calling it the day dignity spoke. Naomi smiled faintly, setting the phone aside. Outside, the city lights shimmered on the river like constellations scattered across water. Dignity doesn't need to shout, she murmured. It just needs to stand. She picked up her mother's pen, rolling it between her fingers. There would be more battles ahead, other restaurants, other Rachels. But tonight, for the first time in years, she felt the deep, quiet satisfaction of a wound closing. She placed the receipt in a small wooden box beside the photograph of her mother and whispered, "This one's for you." Then she turned off the light, letting the darkness wrap around her like peace earned through storm. 6 months later, Georgetown's summer air carried the hum of cicadas and the smell of roasted coffee drifting from the corner cafe that once divided a city with a handful of coins. Pinnacle Bistro looked different now. The golden letters on the glass door gleamed brighter after the renovation, and the word welcome etched below them caught the sunlight like a promise. Inside, laughter floated above the sound of dishes and jazz. Not nervous laughter, but the kind that came from comfort. Naomi stood near the entrance, watching. The walls were repainted in warm earth tones, and framed photographs of Washington's neighborhoods replaced the sterile corporate art that used to hang there. A community board stood beside the counter, crowded with flyers for local food drives, small business fairs, and charity concerts. She'd insisted on it. Every restaurant under her name would now serve not just food, but the neighborhood around it. Maria was behind the counter, now in a crisp manager's blazer, speaking kindly to a customer about a new dish. Her voice carried pride instead of fear. Zoe sat at a nearby table, laptop open, reviewing footage for the upcoming documentary series Naomi had asked her to produce, The Service Standard, Stories of Respect. Every few minutes she looked up and smiled, still in awe of how far things had come. Naomi breathed it in like sunlight. Change didn't roar. It built quietly, day after day, in the hands of ordinary people choosing decency. Robert Carter walked in, the same navy suit but with a lighter step. "Miss Harris," he greeted warmly. "I've been telling every restaurant in our network to take notes from you. Whatever you're doing, it's working." Naomi smiled. "It's nothing fancy, Robert. Just listening. Listening is rare these days." He handed her a folder. "City Council wants you to speak at the Ethics in Business Forum next month." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "You're giving me homework. Call it influence." He chuckled, then looked around. "I remember the day I stood right here. Quite a different scene." "It was necessary," Naomi said simply. "Truth doesn't always fit on a press release." Robert nodded, tipping an imaginary hat before leaving. Naomi's gaze lingered on the framed photo hanging above the counter, the freeze frame from Zoe's livestream, that exact second she'd placed her business card on the counter months ago. The photographer had captured it from the video still. Naomi's hand steady, her face calm. Rachel's expression half shock, half disbelief. Beneath it, a small brass plaque read, "Sometimes the person you toss aside owns the building you're standing in." People paused to read it, some taking photos, some just nodding quietly before moving on. Naomi turned as Maria approached with a steaming cup of coffee. "Your usual," Maria said softly. "Cream. 2 sugars. You remember. Some things worth remembering," Maria replied with a small smile. Naomi took the cup, wrapping her hands around it. "How are the staff adjusting?" "Better every week. The new hires love the training program. Zoe's video modules are helping." She paused. "There's something else." We got a letter this morning, addressed to you personally. Naomi looked curious. Maria handed over a small envelope, postmarked from Baltimore. The handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar. Naomi set the cup down and unfolded the letter carefully. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and pen ink. The first line read, "Dear Miss Harris, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you." Her heart stilled for a second. It was from Rachel. She read on. "I've been volunteering at a community kitchen for 5 months now. The first day, I couldn't look anyone in the eye. Every time I handed a plate of food to someone, I saw my own arrogance staring back. But something changed. Last week, a young woman came through the line, tired and cold. I remembered what you said about dignity not being something to throw away. I gave her my coat. It wasn't much. But it felt like starting over. I won't ask for my job back. Only the chance to become the kind of person who deserves to work again someday." Naomi finished reading and sat in silence for a long time. Maria watched her quietly. "She's trying," Maria said finally. "Yes," Naomi whispered. "And that's enough for now." She folded the letter neatly and slipped it into her bag beside the old receipt she still kept. They both felt like artifacts, proof of pain and proof of progress. Around them, the restaurant continued to hum with life. Waiters moving gracefully between tables. The sound of a child's laughter near the window. The soft clinking of glasses. Every sound was a small testament that the world, when tended, could heal itself. Naomi walked through the dining area, greeting guests. A middle-aged couple stopped her. "Are you Miss Harris?" The man asked, smiling. "We just wanted to say we read about what happened. It takes courage to stand up like that. My wife and I. We lived through the 60s. It's good to know there are still people who fight the right way." Naomi smiled gently. "Thank you. But what really matters is what we build after the fight." "You built something beautiful," the woman said. "And fair." Naomi touched the woman's hand briefly. "That's the goal." When they left, she turned to see Zoe filming the kitchen staff laughing together as they plated desserts. "Make sure you get Maria's smile in there," Naomi called playfully. Zoe grinned. "Already did." The day rolled forward gently. At closing time, the staff gathered around for a small meeting. Naomi stood beside the counter, hands folded. "6 months ago," she began, "this restaurant made headlines for the wrong reasons. Today, people come here for the right ones. That's not my doing, it's yours. Every act of kindness you show, every customer you treat like family, that's what changes this place." She paused, meeting their eyes one by one. "We can't rewrite history. But we can make the next chapter honest." The team applauded softly, their faces shining with pride. As they dispersed, Maria lingered. "Will you be closing up tonight?" "Yes," Naomi said. "I like to lock the doors myself. Makes it feel finished." Maria nodded and left, the bell over the door chiming softly. Naomi walked through the quiet restaurant, turning off lights one by one until only the glow from the framed photograph remained. She stood before it, her reflection merging with her image in the frame, past and present meeting in the same glass. She whispered, "Justice doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just stands quietly, waiting to be seen." She turned off the last light, stepped outside, and locked the door. The night air was cool, the city lights painting ripples across the Potomac. She walked slowly toward her car, stopping once to look back at the restaurant, its windows glowing faintly like lanterns in the dark. The word "welcome" on the glass caught a glimmer of moonlight. It was more than decoration now. It was a promise fulfilled. She got into her car and drove along the waterfront, passing the memorials and monuments, their marble shining under the stars. Her mother's voice seemed to travel with her, soft and steady. "Baby, one day they'll have to see you." Naomi smiled through the quiet. "They see us now, Mama," she whispered. "And they'll remember." When she reached home, she placed Rachel's letter beside her mother's photograph. Then she lit a small candle on the table, the flame flickering gently in the dim room. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sound of the city settling for the night. Naomi sat by the window with her tea, watching the light dance across the glass. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was fighting. She felt like she was keeping watch, guarding a promise that had finally been kept. The world outside was far from perfect, but tonight, within her small corner of it, justice had found a steady home.